Hello, my name is John Moy, and this is going to be my review of Going Postal by Terry Pratchett for my independent reading assignment. So some basic background for what Going Postal is. It is a Discworld novel, which means it is one of the 41 novels that Terry Pratchett wrote with the setting being Discworld. And this one particularly, Going Postal, is it's part of two separate arcs. Some people consider it to be the fourth Industrial Revolution book because of the invention of the clocks in the book, which I'll explain later. But some people consider it the fourth Industrial Revolution book. Well, it can also be considered the first book in its own separate arc, all about Moist von Lipwig. When it comes to publication order, it was published in 2004. It is the 33rd out of 41 books, and directly before it is Stud, the second to last City Watch book, and directly after it is A Hatful of Sky, which was the third young adult novel. And it's at a unique part in the series because it's the last original arc that Terry Pratchett published as part of Discworld. After this, all you really have left is one more Wizards book, two more City Watch books. You have its two sequels, and then three of the young adult novels. And so it's being the last original series. It has you can tell Terry Pratchett's writing has improved, especially if you go back and read some of the earlier books like Color of Magic, Light Fantastic, and then coming forward to this one, which improves a lot of aspects of Discworld. Some unique things about Discworld novels. This is actually unique among Discworld novels because it actually has chapter markers. See if I can find one. There. It has chapter markers, which compared to other Discworld novels. So here is Guards. This is the 7th Discworld book. There are no chapter markers anywhere throughout. So that's one thing that's unique about Going Postal and its sequels is the lack of chapter markers. And another thing, if you are reading Discworld, is footnotes. They're not all fantasy books have them, but footnotes are integral part of the story, adding a lot of humor, especially for Going Postal, which isn't as humorous. It's a lot more serious than some of the earlier and later, some of the earlier Discworld novels. So the footnotes kind of add humor, but that's something else that is kind of special about Discworld that not all fantasy series have. I want to talk about the covers. This is the collector's edition library cover, with the post office burning, framed by the archway with the letters. This is definitely my favorite cover of Going Postal. It's the same thing on the back without the letters. But I also have, this is one of the earlier hardback prints, which also a good cover, but I do definitely prefer the burning post office compared to the hand with the letter. And we'll see if and then this cover here is going to be kind of the small paperbacks, which a lot of people first experience. That's how I first experienced Discworld. And it does show a pretty iconic scene with Moist's ride to Stolat. So that's also great. And the red is very striking, especially compared to some of the other Discworld novels in the small paperback version, because those books typically have black spines. So the red definitely stands out there. This one is very much looking like it's almost a mixture between a Paul Kirby illustration and some of the new cover editions. It's good, but I kind of wish I got more Paul Kirby from it, because his covers are some of the best in Discworld. And then this is the new paperback cover, and it definitely has the same kind of very vibrant, bright lights, and then the way that almost kind of like the almost searchlights frame the post office in the back is very striking. And kind of, if you just have that one, it looks very, very distinct. Of course, if you have the rest of them, they all do look very similar. All of the new cover editions look very similar. So those are the main covers that I found for Going Postal. So an overview of what Discworld is, for those who have never heard of it before. Discworld is a fantasy setting written by Terry Pratchett, covered over the course of 41 novels. And the basic premise is Discworld is a flat Earth, is a flat world. This is the disc. With 4 elephant. The disc is balanced on 4 elephants, which sit on the shell of a turtle, the great turtle Aotuin, who flies through space. So it's a very absurd concept, but for those that might turn off, it's very. You can be rest assured that, well, yes, that is the overall setting. You won't be necessarily exploring that from book to book. That's really only covered in the Wizard novels. So if you want a more grounded story, that is definitely present here, especially here in the Moist von Lipwig arc and then the City Watch arc. And so what that leads to is the largest city on the disc is Ankh-Morpork, which is located on the Circle Sea. And Ankh-Morpork is famously the city of 10,000 souls, 100,000 souls, and 10 times that many people. And it is kind of a huge center of trade and ideas and the flow of commerce through Discworld. It is run by the patrician Lord Vetinari, and it has the main characteristics of their guilds, which. There's guilds for everything from normal ones like teachers or bankers to guilds for assassins and thieves, which gives Ankh-Morpork a very unique setting, even within the larger disc. In addition to that, Ankh-Morpork is the home of the Unseen University, which is the largest magical university featuring the largest magical library on the disc, which means that wizards and the like are also quite prevalent in the city, which also lead to a very unique setting where wizards are much more closer to interact with people. They don't do it all the time, but it allows for that interaction, which leads to some great moments in these novels. The basic premise of the book is that Moist von Lipwig is condemned to die for his crimes under the alias Alfred Spangler. However, instead of being hanged, he's offered a job by Lord Vetinari to instead revitalize the crumbling post office, becoming postmaster, and leading a crusade against the clacks, which are a new form of technology very similar to the telegraphs in our world, and the telegraph in our world. And he has to compete against this evil corporation in order to prevail, and it allows for Moist to kind of convert, and you can see throughout the book the character development that this gives him, to convert from this swindler and this con man to someone who's really likable by the end. That's our premise, and our basic summary is going to be that Moist is first to be hanged as Alfred Spangler. However, after his hanging, he is in Lord Vetinari's office, having been hanged within an inch of his life, and when Lord Vetinari offers him a way out. Become the postmaster, or will dispose of you in a different way. And Moist decides to accept the position, but almost as soon as he is out of Lord Vetinari's office, he immediately makes a run for it to the nearest town in order to escape and start swindling people once again. However, he's recovered by his parole officer, a golem named Mr. Pump, and Mr. Pump brings him back to the post office to start his first day of work. However, when Moist reaches the post office, it's crumbling. The sign out front is missing letters that have been stolen over the years, and inside is stuffed. Almost every single room is stuffed with mail that was never delivered. That's when he meets his 2 employees, Stanley, who is who's an assistant to the oldest working member of the post office, Junior Postman Grote. The only reason he's a junior postman is one has been there long enough in order to promote him to a new role. Moist, seeing that he is stuck in this situation, decides to make the best of it, and goes out to start to gather the things he needs in order to succeed at his new role. Along the way, he meets Adorabelle Deerheart, who runs the Golem Trust, which helps free golems and help them find work. And and help them find work in order to find out more information about his parole officer. In addition to that, along the way, he happens to have a letter that he delivers to someone. However, on his travels, Moist found out that he's not the first postmaster in a long time, but in fact, there have been 5 people before him who have disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Upon returning to the post office, Moist confronts Grote and asks him what happened to the postmasters. Apparently, they died in extremely mysterious circumstances. After visiting the Unseen University and talking with one of their professors, he finds out that because of the large amount of letters, these letters are distorting reality in the post office and because they were written long ago, it has caused the new postmasters to hallucinate about events from the past and go insane, leading to their deaths. Whether they believing that a balcony is still there, even though it had been destroyed months ago, or being killed under cascades of letters that were trying to free themselves. That night, Moist is ripped out of his bed and is forced to join the secret society of postmen. After joining the secret society, he recruits those same society members in order to be postmen for the post office, in order to increase the flow of mail being delivered and received for the post office. That's when he finds out via a tip-off that the Clax line to Stolat has been taken offline temporarily due to faulty equipment. Moist makes the decision to run his own mail line to Stolat in order to take business away from the Clax and start to entrench the post office in the eyes of the public. This is also coming along with Moist's development of the revolutionary new usable stamps, which are helping to make it easier to send letters than ever and cutting down on forgeries. So on his way, Moist makes the delivery to Stolat, and along the way captures the eyes of the public, thrusting the post office into center stage and starting to lead to a confrontation with the Clax that will pay off later in the book. After he takes his trip to Stolat, he recovers the post office carriages, which were taken by another corporation in order to deliver passengers, in order to deliver mail, making sure that the trails to Stolat and the local city Quirm are steady and happen more frequently, thus starting to entrench the post office in the everyday running of the city. After that, Moist is on a date with Adorabelle Deerheart when he runs into Guilt for the first time. He is the chairman of the Grand Trunk, the only Clax company, and it shows the first true confrontation between the leaders of these two opposing organizations. However, during dinner, Moist suddenly has to leave as he finds out the post office is on fire. The post office was burned down in a plot by the Grand Trunk Company in order to remove competition. And along the way, Junior Postman Grote, now Senior Postman, is injured by the Banshee who was sent to do the job. However, Moist is able to kill the Banshee by shoving it into the letter sorting machine, but it doesn't change the fact that the post office is now destroyed. However, the next morning, Moist finds out via another tip-off that the line to Persepolis the Clax line to Persepolis is going to shut down at 9 a.m. that morning. So Moist decides to, despite the fact that the post office only has 2 walls, he is going to run mail to the city, leading to a massive rush that causes tensions to escalate with the Grand Trunk Company. Meanwhile, while the mail run to Persepolis is running, he fakes an encounter with various deities and uses that as an excuse to dig up the treasure of Alfred Spengler, his alter ego when he was a con man, in order to use the money to help cover the cost of repairing the post office. This angers Guilt so much. That he starts to manipulate the media in order to make the Grand Trunk look better than it is. Moist does not like this and issues a challenge to the Grand Trunk Company, who can deliver a message from Ankh-Morpork to Guyana faster. This is a city on the opposite side of the world, 4,000 miles away, whether it be the Clacks or the post office. Guilt accepts the challenge, and a couple days later, the race kicks off. Then after that, at the reception at the Unseen University to discover which side won, Moist tampers with the results, meaning that the message that arrived there first via Clacks calls out the crimes of the Grand Trunk Company, using the concept of sending home, in which dead Clacksmen will have their names sent along the Clacks lines. This causes Lord Ventinari to step in and investigate the Grand Trunk Company, leading to the post office now being in charge of the Clack service, as the Grand Trunk Company is being investigated for their crimes. That's a long summary, but we'll go through a couple of those pivotal scenes later in the review. But that's kind of the basics of what happened throughout the book. And part of the reason, so in addition to that really great plot, I mean, it's got highs and lows, and it's exciting all the way through. Another thing that makes Going Postal so amazing is the characters. Discworld is known for its great characters, and Going Postal does not disappoint, especially whether it's bringing back probably the best versions we've seen of old favorites, as well as introducing so many new characters that show the best of what Discworld has to offer. I think the best way to start is Lord Vetinari. He is the patrician of Ankh-Morpork, and a character that we've seen numerous times over the course of other novels, whether it be City Watch books or the Wizards books that are set in Ankh-Morpork at the Unseen University. And Lord Ventinari is interesting as a character because, despite getting so much screen time throughout the Discworld series, he's not actually a protagonist. He isn't the main character at any point in these novels. Instead, he acts as an extension of Ankh-Morpork, as an extension of the city itself, being just as part of the city as the guilds are. And while I think that Ankh-Morpork as a whole, whether it be the guilds, whether it be the citizenry, everything, just the city itself is at its best in the City Watch novels, I think Lord Vetinari works best in Going Postal for a couple and its two sequels, Making Money and Raising Steam, for a couple reasons. One of the main reasons is that what the purpose of Lord Vetinari in those books are. So for our City Watch books, the point of Lord Vetinari is almost to act as a foil to Commander Vimes and Captain Carrot, and even Sergeant Colin in some of the books. And the reason that he's there is to show the differences in how the policemen versus how the policemen help the city and see the citizenry, and how they care about the people versus how Ventinari does it. And the reason that Lord Ventinari isn't able to come to his own is because the best part about Lord Ventinari is how politically savvy he is, how good he is at manipulating people to do what he wants. And you can't see that as much in the City Watch books because you are not looking through the lens of a character who is capable of doing the same things. Maybe not on the level Lord Vetinari is, but is still capable of who has a similar skill set. And I mean, the only person we see in the City Watch books who has a similar skill set and is probably the closest match you'll ever get to Lord Vetinari in the Discworld series when it comes to political savviness is Lady Margalota, who's a vampire from Uvervold, which means, but even still, those are only two books, and we don't actually get to see Lady Magalotta and Lord Vetinari competing because they're friends. So you get great manipulative moments from both of them, but you never get to see what happens when two of the best are up against each other, which kind of undersells Lord Vetinari's talents. That's not true in Going Postal. Every single opponent that Lord Vetinari is placed against in Going Postal and its two sequels are also master manipulators, and it allows us to see, despite the fact that he's going against people who are the best at what they do, Lord Vetinari is even better, and it allows us just to see the true extent of what Lord Vetinari can do when he is what Lord Vetinari can do when he is facing someone who has a similar skill set to him. I mean, it's something that's talked about a lot throughout the Discworld, that Lord Vetinari doesn't pull your strings; he arranges for you to pull them yourself. And in this, you can see that in this novel, because even people who are used to pulling the strings end up pulling their own the way that Lord Vetinari wants them. Every single plot that he has in these novels, he follows through on and succeeds. And I love how this book can still bring us the most iconic version of a character that's been in Discworld since almost the very beginning. He was first introduced in book 7, Guards, and yet the best version is still all the way here in book 33. It just shows how versatile these Discworld characters are. Alright, so after Vetinari, another great character in Discworld, in Going Postal, is going to be the main villain. Reacher Gilt, who is the chairman of the Grand Trunk Company. The Grand Trunk Company is the Clax company that Moise is competing against throughout the entire novel. And the reason that Gilt stands so high above not just other Discworld villains, so he certainly does do that, but a lot of other fantasy villains, is he oozes style. Like, he's a horrible person, and I'll get to that in a second, but even though the fact that you hate him, you've got to admit that he has style. One of the scenes, during the scene, during his date, yes. If Moise was any judge at all, the man in front of him was the biggest fraud he'd ever met, and he advertised it. That was style. The pirate curls, the eye patch, even the parrot. 12.5%, for heaven's sake. Didn't anyone spot that? He told them what he was, and they laughed, and they loved him for it. And Reacher is such a great villain because everything he does is pretty much style. Everything he does is stylish, and because of that, you've got even Moise, who's directly against him, who's seen firsthand the horrors that are being caused because of Reacher, is like, he has to admit he's got style, and that makes it so entertaining because of that style. In addition to that, another thing that makes Reacher a great villain is because of the sense of foreboding over every scene of this novel, because of what you see of what he is willing to do. And I think that because you've seen what he's capable of, what he's willing to do to get what he wants, it just makes everything else so much more nerve-wracking, because you're like, oh my god, the characters that I love and care about are in this situation with this monster. And that just makes everything so stressful. His shadow looms over everything that happens in this book. I think the only villain in Discworld that compares is probably Vorbis from Small Gods, in a different way, but both of the men are villains who their presence looms over everything that happens, and it just makes him such a powerful presence in the book, that he makes the book better simply by being by being in it. Being in it. In addition to that, one of the reasons that he's such a great villain is because you hate him. You like there are some villains like you're like, oh yeah, they're a horrible person. But you genuinely hate Reacher Guilt because of what he is. Like, he doesn't get his hands dirty, right? He's not a murderer who goes out and actually does the killing to people. He just reduces safety standards so low that people die just doing their job. The neglect for corporate stability, for the consumer, for the people who works at them, that essentially corporate murder is occurring almost daily because of the gross negligence that the Grand Trunk Company is in the Grand Trunk Company because of Reacher and his desire to hit profit goals. That people are just dying on the Clacks Towers because, yeah, it's a dangerous job, but if it's run by proper management, people don't die as much. It's a freak accident rather than an everyday occurrence it is under Reacher's leadership. And especially now where we have so many news stories about horrible working conditions, especially in the Far East, where you're seeing that and then you're like, oh, I hate him. Because they're like, I hate that in the real world, but I hate him because of it as well. And that it just makes him one even more effective as a villain because of immediately you hate him. From the first scene you meet him, you hate him. And it actually you hate him before you meet him. You just heard his name in addition to what he's done, and you're like, oh, I already hate him. I don't even have to meet him. And that's what makes him, once again, making him such an effective villain. I think the final point of why he's such a great villain is because he acts as a foil to Moist. Not really foil. He acts as Moist without morals. Because in the beginning of the book, Moist is a largely immoral person, but his one moral is that he will not kill. He will not kill someone. He will not do something. He does things, but he's not trying. He doesn't have the growth. He doesn't care. He cares if someone dies because of him. Is the best way to put that. So he has very little morals, but that's his one. Guilt is Moist if he didn't have that one moral. Guilt has zero morals whatsoever. As long as it's as long as he's making more money, he doesn't care what he has to do, who has to be killed. He's going to do it. And because of that, it allows you to see the difference between. It allows you to root for Moist even more because you see what he could have become but isn't. In addition to that, Guilt is arguably just as good at manipulating people as Moist is. You'll see how well Moist manipulates people. Guilt is just as good, and so it's a great conflict between the two of them as they're tugging at the same people, and trying to see who's going to end up coming out on top. In addition to Guilt, it's perfect time to talk about Moist, the main character of the novel, who you kind of fall in love with immediately because it's kind of the term con man with a heart of gold, where, yeah, he's just a great and affable person despite being a con man. But what's great is the character development that Moist goes on throughout the novel, where he starts where he's like, he tries to escape when he's first offered the position, and then eventually when he figures out he can't escape, he said, well, I'll run it until it's successful, and then I'll skim a little off the top and the sides, top and the bottom and the sides, and a little out of the middle too. And eventually coming to the point at the end of the book where he has the chance to run away, where he has the chance, his parole officer is sent somewhere else, and he's given the chance to run away, and he doesn't do it, right? He's grown attached to the people who are here, and he's actually become a good person, not just having one small moral, but being a good person and actually caring about those around him, and you'll just fall in love with him as you go through this amazing character arc. Adorabelle Dearheart is kind of the catalyst of that character arc because she doesn't really change. Sure, she warms up to Moist, but that's not really a character development. What she stands as is someone who is firmly set in their beliefs, someone who believes something and will fight for what she believes in to the end. She runs the Golem Trust, which helps free golems and find them new work. And she never sways in her caring for golems and her morals throughout the entire thing. And because Moist is with her, it helps him grow. It helps him become a better person because he's interacting with her, and because of the strength of her character and her morals. And by the end, they're one of the cutest couples in this world, which is always nice. The golems are great because they act very. It's sad where there are a lot of great races in Discworld that do not get the time they need to flourish because Discworld ended, or because of Terry Pratchett's unfortunate death. The same thing happened with the goblins, which are introduced even later than this one. But the golems were first introduced in in Feet of Clay, which was the third City Watch book. And I don't know what it is about new races. City Watch introduces them. Same thing happened with goblins being introduced in Snuff, and then a Moist Spawn Lipwig book, whether going postal for golems or raising steam for goblins, takes them and elevates them to a whole new level where of not just character development, but species development, as these fantasy races are put through a microscope, and representing interesting challenges for these species to overcome. For golems, they were created to do work, and they were treated as tools for the entirety of their existence until what is called the most socially conscious revolution in history, where they save up enough money to free themselves, and then once they free themselves, they now work for a salary. And they keep working 6 days a week, 24 hours a day, except for one day off. But now they're free. They are allowed to choose their own morals, their own path. And this book is kind of the development of golems, of finding their own morals, of finding their own way of doing things, and trying to grapple with life without a master, life where they're their own master. And it's great. It's a great character. It's species development for the golems. Then Going Postal has great side characters. And in Stanley and Grote, Stanley is these two characters. It's a dark novel, but Stanley and Grote kind of add some much needed comic relief to the story. Stanley is an avid pin collector until eventually he becomes an avid stamp collector, leading the stamp group, and his earnestness and kind of naivete it just injects so much humor into this novel. And especially one of the scenes during the fire is the first thing he does is grab out his notebook and make a checklist of how to survive a fire that's in the post office ordinances, and his kind of attention to detail and earnestness is just so much fun in the book. And then Grote is an old postman, and who believes only in natural remedies. So, however, what he turns them into is very unnatural and is unusual and potentially dangerous. But once again, it adds a comic relief that this story would not otherwise have, as Grote acts is just such a fun character to contrast with the darker tone of the novel. But after this, we're going to move into our major scenes. All right, so our first great scene in the novel is definitely Lord Ventinari's angel speech. So after Moist is hanged for his crimes, supposedly hanged within an inch of his life, he's called to Lord Ventinari's office, where Lord Ventinari first gives his speech to Moist of, here's your choice. You either become postmaster or you die. And so he starts with, the first interesting thing about angels, Mr. Lipwig, is sometimes, very rarely, at a point in a man's career when he has made such a foul and tangled mess of his life, that death appears to be the only sensible option, an angel appears to him, or should I say, onto him, and offers him a chance to go back to the moment when it all went wrong, and this time do it right. Mr. Lipwig, I should like you to think of me as an angel. And then he follows that up after Moist returns from his escape. Remember the first interesting thing about angels I told you yesterday? I expect you to think about something else. The second interesting thing about angels, Mr. Lipwig, is you only ever get one. And this is such a great scene because it kind of stresses. It's beginning stressing Moist's choice, and then Angels eventually becomes a motif several times throughout the story, and Lord Vetinari is essentially saying to him, "You screwed up. You were hanged. You committed a crime so bad that we had to hang you. But I'm going to offer you a job. You can fix your life. You can turn it around. You can become the postmaster, or you can go back to what you once were doing, and you'll be killed." And it's a scene that eventually the concept of angels and fixing your mistakes becomes very prevalent in the story, 2 or 3 other times, and it kind of is the central antithesis of the novel of Moist's character development. Is anyone can you can change no matter how much you've messed up, how bad it's gotten. You can still fix it. You can still change. And these 2 quotes kind of emphasize the central point of the novel, which is great. Next, we move on to the very first time we meet Reacher Guilt. So Lord Vetinari has called together the members of the Grand Trunk Company, their board of directors, in order to discuss with them the reasons for the repairs, the constant repairs that are being done on the towers, which has left them unusable for days and sometimes even for some of them weeks at a time. And so Lord Vetinari starts by asking questions. That's one thing. That's one of the things he does to disorient his. Lord Vetinari is very good at disarming and disorienting his opponents, and this is one of the ways that we see it is as he asks questions about how everything works, how finance works, and while most of the people in the room take this as an advantage for themselves, all eyes except those belonging to Mr. Slant turned to the speaker, who had become fidgeting in his chair. Mr. Slant was a long-time student of the patrician, and knew that when he appeared to be a confused civil servant asking innocent questions, it was time to watch him closely. And this whole scene is essentially a sparring match between Guilt and Vetinari as they tried to gain the upper hand in this discussion in order to press that advantage into taking control of Lord Vetinari of the Clax Company and Guilt of kind of almost the economy and flow of communication in the city. And here this is just going through Vetinari's opening play, he's asking these innocent questions, and these people, these board members who have not dealt with Vetinari as much as Mr. Slant, who's a lawyer, are thinking they have the advantage while simultaneously giving enough away that Lord Vetinari has them now at his control. This is followed up with once again another disarming play with he pulled a sheet of paper towards him and wrote in careful copperplate hand, "Code of Conduct." The shifting of the paper exposed a file marked embezzlement. The title was, of course, upside down to the rest of the group, and since presumably it was not intended to be read by them, they read it. And once again, it's showing the sparring match. Guilt has yet to make his first move, but here's Vetinari further tipping the scales in his advantage. It's one simple move. He's just moving a sheet of paper, and that happens to expose a file, something he supposedly didn't intend them to read. But it implies that he knows more about the company and what's going on than these people want, and it's making them nervous. They thought they had the upper hand when he was asking those innocent questions, but now they're starting to realize that maybe they're the ones behind, and he is the one with the upper hand. This is followed up by here we go. With Guilt and almost a mini sparring match, this small discussion at the end of the meeting. The laughter died away a little uneasily. Guilt and Vetinari maintained smiles, maintained eye contact. "We should play a game," said Guilt. "I have a rather nice board myself. I play the troll side for preference. Ruthless Ruthless, initially outnumbered, inevitably defeated in the hands of the careless player, said Vetinari. Indeed. Just as the dwarves rely on guile, feint, and swift changes of position. A man can learn all of his opponent's weaknesses on that board, said Guilt. Really? Said Vetinari, raising his eyebrows. Should he not be trying to learn his own? And I love this scene because it shows comparatively to Vetinari and other books, like mainly the City Watch books, it's showing that Vetinari is not up against people who are unexperienced. He's up against people who know what they're doing, who know what they're talking about. And the only difference is, sure, skill level in some extent, but ideology. I think one of the quotes from Guards is, you're under the misconception that there are good people and bad people. There have always been bad people, just some of them are on different sides. That's a Vetinari quote. But what this is showing that of Vetinari and Guild, their differing ideologies. Sure, they're just subtly they're talking about the board game, but if you can tell that they're not, right? It's the way that Pratchett wrote it. It's obvious that they're not talking about the board game. They're talking about their different methods and ideologies approaching business and politics and people, and that's what makes this book so great. Is the amount of moments like that where you have these small moments that build the stakes and the tension, while showing you how skilled these men are at what they do. The next great scene is the trip to Stolat. The reason that this scene is so great is just because it's Moist showmanship. It starts with an interview with a reporter, leading to this climactic dash out of town on a super feisty horse, and it's starting to show the differences in the tactics of Guilt versus Moist. Guilt is relying on the fact that there's no competitor. That's how he captures the public's attention. That's how he keeps them using the Clax, his product. And that's comparative to Moist, who's the underdog, who does not have that built-in customer base, who he has to capture their attention. And it's one of so many stunts. This is probably my favorite of his stunts. But it's one of so many stunts where he is trying to capture the attention and the love and the admiration of the public, because that's how he wins. He cannot win without that love and admiration. And so there are so many scenes where that's all he's doing. He's just trying to capture that. And this is probably the best example of it. Following that, we have the carriage scene where Moist recovers the post office's mail coaches. And this is where we kind of see the return of the motif of angels. Moist counted to 4 in his head while smiling beatifically, and then an angel appeared, he said. And this is falling, so he was trying to get the carriages back, and the people who owned them were not cooperating, and so Moist crafted this intricate story where if this deal didn't go well, what could happen if this deal didn't go well, that ended with both of them losing their business and eventually their lives. It's a complete lie, but the way that Moist tells it is so convincing, and then he essentially tells them, this is what could happen if you don't agree to my terms. But then an angel appeared, and it gave you a second chance. It gave you a chance to agree to my terms this time, so that doesn't happen. And it's a good return of the motif that we saw earlier. Then, after this, we have the date with Adorabelle Deerheart and the fire. Alright, I already read that one. If Moist found the book had been a career killer, it would have been like meeting the man who devised a way to destroy civilizations. This is showing, this kind of shows the skill difference between Moist and Guilt, and how even though they're rivals, they both know each other so well. They both can immediately recognize what the other is and almost respect the skill, which is great. In the next instant, it all came in an instant, in one bolt of understanding, in the glint of an eye. But something ran in front of it as fast as a little fish ahead of a shark. Guilt was shocked, not surprised. That tiny moment was barely measurable on any clock, but just for an instant, the world had gone wrong for Reacher Guilt. The moment had been wiped out so completely that all that remained of it in Moist certainty was that it happened, and the certainty was rigid. And what's interesting is this is Gilt's first time. Sure, Moist already knew that Gilt was his rival. Gilt was not expecting Moist. Moist was expecting Gilt. Gilt was not expecting Moist in return. And this is the moment when Gilt realizes he's not against someone who has no idea what they're doing. Moist knows what he's doing, and Gilt realizes he's got to be more careful. He has to be more careful. He has to use the best of his abilities because he's facing someone who has the same abilities that he does. And this is kind of the first planting of the seed that will eventually break Gilt later in the novel. And then, of course, we come to the fire. Moist rushes out of the restaurant in order to reach the post office in time to put out the fire. And while the fire is mostly put out in the efforts, one of the golems, Angamarand, dies. He's a golem who's been around for 9,000 years, carrying a message all of that time because he never was able to deliver it in time. And one of the steam tanks exploded during the process of putting out the fire, and it destroyed him utterly. And this is a great, what the next passage is, just showing the stories that, showing the golem's development and showing kind of their mindset, a glimpse into their mindset that you don't see often in Discworld. Flames died, sound died, light died. Angarmondadon looked at his hands. There was nothing there except heat, furnace heat, blasting heat that nevertheless made the shapes of fingers. Angarmondadon, a hollow voice repeated. I have lost my clay, said the golem. Yes, said Death. That is standard. You are dead, smashed, exploded into a million pieces. Then who is it is doing the listening? Everything there was about you that wasn't clay. Do you have a command for me? Said the remains of Angarmondadon, standing up. Not now. You've reached the place where there are no more orders. What shall I do? I believe you failed to understand my last comment. Angarmondadon sat down again. Apart from the fact there was sand rather than ooze underfoot, this place reminded him of the abyssal plain. Generally, people like to move on, Death hinted. They look forward to an afterlife. I will stay here, please. Here? There's nothing to do here, said Death. Yes, I know, said the ghost of the gold. It is perfect. I am free. And it's such a heartbreaking scene. It's heartbreaking because he's worked so long to deliver this message and he can't do it. He's dead. It's gone. But it also is such a touching scene of he's free. The golems have spent their entire time learning how to not be a tool, how to be their own person. And now finally, now that he's dead, he can do that. It's tragic, but it's so good. The next scene is, I love it, not because it's a pivotal scene to the story, but more because it's so much fun. This is right after Moist has found the treasure that Alfred Spangler had, Alfred Spangler's treasure, and it's Ventinari talking with Moist in the aftermath. Beginning with the riot at the Grand Trunk offices this morning, which, he says, you instigated. All I did was volunteer to deliver such clack messages and held up by the unfortunate breakdowns, said Moist. I didn't expect the idiots at their office to refuse to hand back the messages to their customers. People pay in advance, after all. I was just helping everyone in a difficult time. I certainly didn't instigate anyone to hit a clerk with a chair. Of course not, said Lord Ventinari. I'm sure you acted quite innocently and from the best of intentions. But I'm agog to hear about the gold, Mr. Moist. $150,000, I believe. Some of it I can't quite remember, said Moist. It's all a bit unclear. Yes, I imagine it is. Perhaps I can clarify a few details, said Lord Veterinary. Around mid-morning, Mr. Lipwig, you were chatting to people outside your regrettably distressed building when, here the patrician glanced at his notes, you suddenly looked up, shielded your eyes, and dropped to your knees and screamed, yes, thank you, I'm not worthy. Glory be, may your teeth be picked clean by birds, hallelujah, rattled your drawers, and similar phrases to the general concern of the people nearby. Then you stood up with your hands outstretched and shouted, $150,000 buried in the field. Thank you, I shall fetch it immediately. Whereupon you wrested a shovel from one of the men, helping to clear the debris of the building and to walk with some purpose out of the city. Really, it's all a bit of a blank. Sure it is, said Lord Veterinary, nodding. You'll be quiet. And what I love about this scene is Moist and Ventinari know exactly what happened. They know it was Alfred Spangler's money that was dug up. They both know what happened, but for the sake of the fact that it cannot have officially happened because Moist is officially not Alfred Spangler. Alfred Spangler was his birth name, and Lord Ventinari never hired a hanged criminal. Alfred Spangler has always been dead, hanged by the hanged. And it's just so much fun to see them. They both know the truth, but they can't officially go out and say it, leading to this fun back and forth. But after that, we get back to pivotal scenes. This is Guilt's board meeting. And this scene is so interesting because so you already have Moist, who's gotten a leg up on the Grand Trunk Company, and so we've reached the point where Lord Vetsinov, where Guilt is striking back. He is trying to recover what has been lost, and he's trying to recover what is lost, and kind of bring the Grand Trunk Company back to profitability. There wasn't silence. It went beyond silence. "What are you suggesting?" said Nutmeg. "Embezzlement, theft, breach of trust, misappropriation of funds. People can be so harsh," said Guilt. He threw open his arms again, and a big, friendly smile emerged like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "Gentlemen, I understand. Money was made to work, to move, to grow, not to be locked up in some vault. Poor Horsefly, I believe, did not understand that. So much of a mind, poor fellow, but we are businessmen. We understand these things, my friends." He surveyed the faces of the men who now knew that they were riding a tiger. It had been a good ride up until a week or so ago. It wasn't the case of not being able to get off. They could get off. That was not the problem. The problem was that the tiger knew where they lived. And it's showing Guilt's control of the board. The board is so far in that they have to go along with him. They realize at this point that this isn't going to work, that they're screwed. But Guilt can destroy. They know that Guilt can destroy them, and so they have to play along. And it's just showing how effective of a villain Guilt is to be able to lure these people in. They're in. They think this was their idea the entire time, and then at the end, they're stuck, and they have no choice but to follow along, or else they lose everything. And then Moist's reaction is just as good. "I suspect of anything," said Miss Deerheart, "but you sound very certain." "That's what I'd do," said Moist. "Or if I were that kind of person, it's the oldest trick in the book. You get the punt, you get the others so deeply involved that they don't dare fold. It's the dream, you see. They think if they stay in, it'll all work out. They daren't think it's all a dream. You use big words and tell it's going to be jammed tomorrow, and they hope. But they'll never win. Part of them knows that, but the rest of them never listens to it. The house always wins." This is showing Moist knows Guilt like no one else does. He was a con man, like Guilt is a con man, and what this allows Moist to do is, I'm almost seeing to his head. Moist knows how Guilt thinks, and this is going to lead to Guilt's downfall as Moist is able to exploit that. This kind of shows that Moist's ability to take advantage of this situation because he knows Guilt. He knows what to do. But it kind of reinstates the fact that the other members of the board are too far in deep now that Guilt can make them do whatever he wants. And it's once again another reason to hate him and be terrified of him. His shadow is still looming, because if he can make them do what he wants, what about everyone else? Which is just it's scary to think about. And then of course we have the challenge starting. Moist has no plan, but he has to go through it anyway. And not all of these quotes are going to be things that are pivotal to the scene. Some of them are just funny, like this one. "Besides, I heard there are bandits over the mountain," said Moist. "Used to be," said Jim. "Not as many then now." There's something less to worry about," said Moist. "Dunno," said Jim. "We never found out what wiped them out." But going back to things that kind of the pivotal quotes, a huge quote from this book is, "Remember that the crowd that always applauds your coronation is the same crowd that applauds your beheading. People like a show." And that's in stating what Moist has done this entire book, is give people a show. The amount of times where Moist has given the show with Stolat, with the stamps, with the gold, with everything he's done has been giving people a show in order to get them on his side. That's the only thing he can do. He doesn't have the power that Guilt has, but he has the influence from this show. But he knows that it's a wave he has to ride, because if he messes up once, he falls off, which is shown in our next quote. I wonder if it's like this for mountain climbers, he thought. You climb bigger and bigger mountains, and you know one day one of them is going to be just a bit too steep. But you keep doing it because it's so good when you breathe the air up there, and you'll know you'll die falling. And it's kind of interesting, he knows that eventually this isn't sustainable. Eventually, he cannot give a bigger and bigger and bigger show every time. But he has to, because otherwise he fails. And he realizes it's unsustainable. But he's forced into it. He has to keep going until he either wins or he falls, and it's exciting, but it's also kind of stressful. You're like, is this going to be the time that he loses? Is this going to be the time that he loses? And one of the other things that shows how good Moist is with the public is a lot of bookies are offering odds. Mr. Goat is organizing, sir. He said the odds aren't good enough, though. I shouldn't think they are, Moist said weakly. No one in their right mind would. He said we'd only win $1 for every 8 we bet, sir. But we reckon. Moist shut up. 8-1 odds on, he said. He shouted. The bookies think I'm going to win. How much are you all betting? About $1,200 at the last count, sir. And that's once again showing how much Moist shows have influenced the public, even the people who work for him, where they think the bookies think he's going to win, the public thinks he's going to win. It's impossible. 4,000 miles versus with essentially the speed of sound versus a horse, because that's how fast the Seven can travel. There's no contest there yet. People think that Moist can win. It's impossible, but they do, and that's just showing the show that Moist has put on again and again and again is building and building till the public just believes him. If he says he's going to do something, even if it is impossible. But Moist doesn't think it's possible. He knows it's impossible. He doesn't have a plan yet, and he tells that to Adorable Deerheart. That's after he told them that his cons were the reason he lost his job. And she said, go up there tonight, Mr. Lipwood. Get yourself a little bit closer to heaven, and then get down on your knees and pray. You know how to pray, don't you? Just put your hands together and hope. And hope is in addition to the theme of second chances, hope is a major theme of this novel, because of Going Postal, because Moist can't control largely anything. He's just hoping for it to work out, and it does, but there are a lot of things that don't work out. The post office burns down, for heaven's sake. And so this is just further emphasizing the point, the major themes of the novel. But after this, Moist heads out for the start of the contest. And he can't help himself. One more time, he has to put on a show the best that he knows how. Now I must, but once we've hit, Moist allowed a look of genuine concern across his face. Yes, it does seem unfair, he said. He turned to ponder Stribbins. Do you think that's unfair, Mr. Stribbins? The wizard looked puzzled. But once they've coded, it'll only take them a couple of hours to get to Tikiana, he said. Nevertheless, I insisted, Moist. We don't want an unfair advantage. Stand down, Jim, he called up to the coachman. We're going to give the Clacks a head start. He turned to ponder Stibbins and Mr. Pony with an expression of innocent helpfulness. When all be all right, gentlemen, the crowd exploded. And it's again, Moist can put on a show better than anyone else, and here it is one more time. Moist getting the crowd riled up. He's already at a crazy disadvantage. He needs all the time he can get, and he's giving them an hour because he knows that it's going to push the Clacksmen as far as they possibly can. The crowd is so much on their side. They're getting stressed. They're getting overwhelmed. And what we're going to see, the straw that breaks the camel's back is going to be in a second. Would you care for a little personal wager, Mr. Gilt? I've been looking at the wrong thing. Personal wager, Mr. Gill, he said, just to make it interesting. You'll handle it well if you couldn't read the tells, the little signs. Dear me, Mr. Lipwig, do the gods approve of gambling, he said, and gave a short laugh. What is life but a lottery, Mr. Gilt, said Moist. Shall we say $100,000? That did it. That was the last straw. He saw something snap inside Richard Gilt. 100,000. Where would you lay your hands on that kind of money, Mr. Lipwig? Oh, I just placed them together, Mr. Gilt. Doesn't everyone know that? Said Moist to general amusement. He gave the chairman his most insolent smile. And where will you lay your hands on $100,000? And it said there, he saw Gilt snapped. Moist has pushed him so far that Gilt is angry. And when Gilt gets angry, he makes mistakes. And angry men make mistakes, and Moist knows that. And so he has pushed Gilt to the breaking point because he knows that's the only way he can win. He needs to push him so far to give him something to give Moist something to exploit. And this is Moist's chance. This is Moist's chance. He has pushed Gilt to the point that he's going to make mistakes. And we'll see that in a moment as Gilt says, I don't care what you don't care about, tells the Klaxman, I don't care what the message is. Instead, I don't care what the message is. Instead, just send it on as fast as possible. It doesn't matter what it is, just do it. And that's going to be the thing that gives Moist his advantage, because Moist's master plan is to change the message into the message we're about to see at the reception, and we see one final time how Moist has gotten to Gilt. He scanned the rest of the crowd and spotted Richard Gilt standing off to one side and surprisingly not smiling, and Gilt saw him. One look was enough. The man wasn't certain, not totally certain. Welcome to fear, said Moist to himself. It's hope, turned inside out. You know it can't go wrong. You're sure it can't go wrong. But it might. I've got you. And Moist is inside Gilt's head, and Gilt made the one mistake that will be fatal to him, as we'll see right here. In the big disc of glass, Collarbone cleared his throat. Who will listen to the dead? We who died so that the words could fly demand justice now. These are the crimes of the board of the Grand Trunk: theft, embezzlement, breach of trust, corporate murder. And Moist changed the message, and it's a call. And as it talks about in the book, that these aren't concrete claims, but they are spoken. But it's public now. These claims are public. They're no longer hidden behind closed doors, and it doesn't matter if they're true. It's what matters is what the public believes. As we continue on to more hilarity from the Wizards. The Wizards are probably the funniest part of any book they're in. I will sue the university. I will sue the university, screamed Greeningham. He picked up a chair and hurled it at the omniscope. Halfway to the glass, it turned to a small flock of doves who panicked and soared up to the roof. Oh, please, sue the university, ridiculously bellowed. Got a pond full of people who tried to sue the university. Silence, said Vetinari. It wasn't a very loud word, but it had an effect rather like that of a drop of black ink in a glass of clear water. The words spread out in coils and tendrils, getting everywhere. It strangled the noise. And it's Vetinari's power one more time of Vetinari is in such control over this situation that is in such control of this situation. People are terrified. He speaks the word silence and people are silent, which shows his influence. And then and then, sorry, I missed a scene earlier. That's the scene at the Unseen University, and I'll quote for it because it's just hilarity of the Unseen University staff. That's another scene to watch out for if you do read this book. That's why I recommend reading the Wizards books, because they are always so funny. But essentially the fact that the way that they're finding out the message was delivered was essentially it was an omniscope, which is essentially FaceTime. So the Wizards are using Skype while everyone else is using letters and now telegrams, and it's just hilarity with the Wizards. And then we finish out with the scene at the bank, which is the very last scene of the novel. And sometimes the truth arrived by adding all the little lies together and deducting them from the totality of what is known. And totality is what is known. No enchanter circle, no mystic's mandala was ever drawn with such painful, meticulous care that was being played on the floor. Hour after hour it went on, with a patience that at first terrified and then bored. It was warfare of clerks, and they harried the enemy through columns and files. Moist could read the words that weren't there, but clerks found numbers that weren't there, or there twice, were there going the wrong way. They didn't hurry, peel away the lies, and the truth would emerge, naked and ashamed, with nowhere to hide. And then... It wasn't until dawn until the somber men arrived. They were older and fatter and better, but not showily, never showily dressed. They moved with the gravity of serious money. They were financiers. Financiers, too, richer than kings, who were often quite poor, but hardly anyone out in the city outside their circle knew them or would ever notice them in the street. They spoke quietly to Cheeseborough as to one who suffered a bereavement, and they talked among themselves and used little gold-propelling pencils and neat little notebooks to make figures dance and jump through hoops. And the quiet agreement was reached and hands were shaken, which in this circle carried infinitely more weight than any written contract. The first domino had been studied. The pillars of the world ceased to tremble. The credit bank would open in the morning, and when it did so, bills would be honored, wages would be paid, and the city would be fed. They saved the cities with gold more easily at that point than any hero could have managed to steal. But in truth, it had not been exactly gold, or even the promise of gold, but more like the fantasy of gold, the fairy dream that the gold is there, the end of the rainbow, and will continue to be there forever, provided, naturally, that you don't go and look. This is known as finance. On the way home from a simple breakfast, one of them dropped by the Guild of Assassins to pay his respect to his old friend Lord Downey, during which visit current affairs were only lightly touched upon. And Richard Guild, wherever he had gone, was now certainly the worst insurance risk in the world. The people who guard the rainbow don't like those who get in the way of the sun. And this final scene is so wonderful because it perfectly wraps up the story. We saw the themes of the angels earlier. We saw the themes of hope, and this is the final theme of the way money works is a major theme throughout the story, and it's just a perfect encapsulation to that third theme of kind of an almost look inside. It's not a true look, but it's kind of almost a metaphor or an exaggeration of what kind of the forces behind the finance and the money that run our world. And we close off the novel with our epilogue, which is a perfect capstone to our novel because it almost bookmarks the book. Because it is Guilt sitting in Lord Vetinari's office talking about angels. And it parallels very perfectly the scene in the beginning of the book with Moist, and it's Vetinari offering Guilt a role as a role in charge of the you're offering me a job. Yes. Do you believe that what the mint needs is to see it through as a man who understands the dream of currency. There will be a salary and I believe a hat. And you'll see in the next book that Guilt does not choose to take this role, but it's once again a kind of showing what the kind of person that Moist is versus Guilt. Moist, when offered the job, took it. He saw there was no other way out and was willing to become better. Guilt didn't do that and wouldn't do that, and that led to his unfortunate demise at the hands of Lord Vetinari. But it's a great it's a great bookmark. It's a great kind of end to the book because it's starts with Moist getting the angel speech and being offered a job, and ends with Guilt doing the same thing. But now we're going to move into some of my favorite quotes from Discworld. There are a lot of them. And then I'll mainly just read through them and give you maybe a bit of context. So in the beginning, in that case, said Moist Von Litwig, I commend my soul to any god that can find it. Nice, said the hangman and pulled the lever. Alfred Spengler died. It was generally agreed that they'd been good last words. Most of these are more of the funny things, the funny or kind of poignant quotes that I didn't get to earlier. They weren't plot relevant. Yes. You see, I believe in freedom, Mr. Lipwig. Not many people do, although they will, of course, protest otherwise. And no practical definition of freedom would be complete without the freedom to take the consequences. Indeed, it is the freedom which all of the others are based, which is a rather poignant quote of people who believe that just because you have freedom doesn't mean that there are no consequences to your actions, and because that's part of being free. You can do anything you want, but there are consequences to doing what you want. And I do love Ventinari's little quotes. What a place, what a situation, what kind of man would put known criminal in charge of a major branch of government, apart from, say, the average voter? That's especially poignant this week. I wrote this script before this past week, which makes it especially sad. So there's that. Have you not heard the saying, man's not dead while his name is still spoken? This is a big quote in the Discworld community because of Terry Pratchett's unfortunate demise, saying that because of the books he wrote, because of his influence, he's not truly dead while his influence lives on. And that's a quote that's especially loved by the Discworld community because of that. Calm yourself, Crispin. Nothing is going to go wrong. You think about money in an old-fashioned way. Money's not a thing. It's not even a process. It's a kind of shared dream. We dream that a small disc of common metal is worth the price of a substantial meal. Once you wake from that dream, you can swim in a sea of money. And that's kind of going back to the three themes I talked about: hope, change, and then kind of the underlying kind of theme of how the economy and how money works. That's kind of fitting into that third theme. Kind of poking at the kind of systems that hold our world together, the concept of currency. 231. You make anywhere in the world, even to the gods, our postmen don't break down so easily. History is not to be denied. Very impressive, Mr. Lipwig. You made quite the splash. Lord Ventinari smiled, as the fish said to the man with the lead weight tied to his feet. That's just a funny one. The post office was the underdog, and the underdog always can find somewhere soft to bite. That kind of shows kind of the core mindset of Moist, the entire book, of we can find something to do. It doesn't matter if it's small, but we can always find something to do to take on the Grand Trunk. You should have been there. You should have seen it. That's another motif. The Angels is one motif. You should have been there. You should have seen it. What is a motif that kind of, it's kind of with the excitement that is going on, but also there's a lot of kind of reminiscing about the past, of the glories of the post office in the past, the glories of the Clacks before it was taken over by the businessmen, and it's one of the motifs that's common throughout the story. I've got quotes across both copies of the book. No, Moist fist thumped the table. Never say that, Tolliver. Never. Run before you can walk, fly before you can crawl, keep moving forward. Which is, it once again shows Moist's mindset of don't stop. If you stop it, things go wrong. And so just keep working at it until eventually you'll get to where you want to go. You either fail and nothing matters at that point, or you succeed. And his advice is you need to give people the show. You need to move fast or else everything falls through. So do it. Move quickly. You're fully no one but yourself, said Miss Dearheart, and reached for his hand. Moist shook her off, ran out of the building, out of the city, and back to his old life, or lives, always moving on, selling glasses, diamond, but somehow it just didn't seem to work anymore. Flair wasn't there, the fun had dropped out of it, even the cards didn't seem to work for him. The money ran out. and then an angel appeared. Coming back to that angel motif at the very end, it's showing Moist's development. In the beginning, if he was given this opportunity to run away, he would have done it. But he's reached the point where he doesn't anymore, where he is he's willing and ready to move on, and to he's willing and ready to move on to become a better person, and it just kind of encapsulates his character development. These aren't in order. Oh, yeah, that's actually it. So thank you for listening to my, frankly, quite rambly review of Going Postal by Terry Pratchett. It is one of my favorite books of all time. It is actually ranked 18th of all books. And I've read a lot of books, so that is actually quite high. It is my 5th favorite Discworld novel, after Guards, Going Postal. Sorry, after Guards, Men at Arms, Reaper Man, and Small Gods. It is one of if you want to read Discworld, there are 3 places I recommend you start. My number 1 recommendation of where to start is, of course, going to be Guards by Terry Pratchett. I love this book to death. It is my favorite Discworld novel, so that's my number 1 recommendation of where to start. But Moist von Lithwick, if you want to start with arguably one of the best of Discworld, it's definitely the most consistent arc. City Watch is great. It's not the most consistent when it comes to quality. This one is. This trilogy is. So if you want a trilogy that is consistently great, and you want to read Discworld, absolutely start with this. I highly recommend it. Absolutely a 10 out of 10 novel. And thank you for listening to what's arguably been too long. Thank you. Goodbye.